My mother's exact words, in front of 200 people holding wine glasses she'd rented by the case. "We don't know this one." That's the sentence I want you to sit with, because it took her 4 seconds to say it, and it took me 9 years to stop flinching every time a phone rang with her area code. But I'm not going to tell you about that sentence yet. First, I need to tell you about a wristwatch, a fire helmet, and a scholarship with somebody else's name on it, because by the end of this story, all 3 of them are sitting on the same table, and only one person in that ballroom knows why. If you've ever been the family's disappointment for choosing the wrong kind of hard work, stay through this one. Subscribe, you're going to want the ending. I'm Nora. I was 28 the night my sister got married, and I almost didn't go. Here's how I found out about the wedding at all. Not from an invitation, from a mistake. A courthouse assistant emailed the wrong Callaway, a save-the-date PDF, meant for extended family, and there was my name, misspelled, on a guest list I wasn't supposed to see. My own sister hadn't told me she was engaged. That should have been my answer right there. I RSVP'd anyway. I want you to remember that detail, because it matters later. I chased an invitation nobody actually sent me. To understand why that stung so much, you need to see the hallway I grew up walking through every single morning. My family are lawyers. Not a lawyer, a firm, 3 generations deep, with a hallway my father called the bench. Framed bar admissions, law review honors, 1 judicial appointment, floor to ceiling. Sunday dinner had a ritual. My mother went around the table, asking what each of us had argued that week. Grades, mock trial wins, debate trophies. My sister Josie always had an answer ready like she'd rehearsed it in the car. I never had an answer, because at 11 years old, when our neighbor's dog got hit by a car, I was the one who kept pressure on the wound with my school jacket until the vet arrived, not the one drafting a closing argument about it. My mother didn't yell about that. Yelling was for families without standards. She just quietly stopped calling on me at dinner, and the summer I was 14, a new frame went up on the bench, empty, at the bottom. When I asked what it was for, she said, "That one's yours. Whenever you earn it." Here's the part nobody in my family ever found out, and I need you to hold on to it. That empty frame was never for a law degree. I never told them what I actually wanted to fill it with. I let them assume, because their assumption kept the peace. The night everything broke, I was 19. My mother sat me down with a folder and told me the education fund, money saved since I was born, had been reallocated, her word, to Josie's law school tuition, because, she said, an investment goes where the return is. Then she gave me the choice: enroll in pre-law in the fall, or move out. I want you to notice something about that sentence, because it comes back at the very end of this story, in a way you will not expect. She didn't say become a lawyer, she said pre-law. She never once asked what I actually wanted to become. If she had asked, the whole story might have gone differently. She never asked. I packed 2 duffel bags in under an hour. Nobody stopped me. At the door, my mother said, "You're choosing to embarrass this family." I said, "I'm choosing to stop asking permission to exist in it." Small, unglamorous exit line. I meant every word of it. The only person who came after me that night was my grandfather, my mother's father, Walt, a retired fire captain, 31 years on Engine 12. He caught me at the bus stop in his undershirt and slippers, no jacket, freezing, and pressed something small and cold into my palm, his collar pin, the brass 12 he wore his whole career. "Kid," he said, "nobody on that bench ever pulled a person out of a burning building. You did, when you were 11, with a dog. Don't let them tell you which kind of brave doesn't count." Then he said one more sentence, started it, and stopped, like he'd lost his nerve. "And there's something else your mother never—" He shook his head. "Later. Call me Sunday." There was no later. I'll get to that. I enrolled in EMT school the following month, on my own dime, sleeping on a co-worker's couch. I want to skip past the hard years fast, because they were hard in the boring, grinding way poverty is always boring. But here's the one moment that mattered. My first solo call was a man in cardiac arrest in a walk-up apartment with no working elevator. I ran up 6 flights. He lived. Nobody in my family ever asked me about that night. I didn't tell them. I stopped expecting them to ask. At 23, my phone rang at 2 a.m. It was a hospital, not about a patient, about my grandfather. Stroke. I drove 3 hours straight through. When I got to the ICU desk, the nurse checked a clipboard and told me, kindly, that the visitor list was locked to immediate family, managed by medical power of attorney, my mother. I stood in that hallway in my EMT uniform, badge and all, and I was not on the list of people allowed to see the man who'd given me his badge. He died 4 days later. I found out from a text, after the funeral had already happened. A week before his stroke, though, he'd left me a voicemail. 40 seconds. I played it the night I heard he was gone, and got exactly 9 seconds in. Nora, it's your grandfather, and there's something I should have told you years ago, before my thumb hit stop on its own, like a reflex I didn't order. I could not make myself hear the rest. I carried that unfinished sentence for 5 years, the way some people carry a stone in their coat pocket. You forget it's there until you reach in for something else. Here's what I built instead of grieving quietly. 18 months later, with $11,000 and a folding table in a strip mall, I started a company training first responders for large-scale disaster response, the kind of coordination most small city fire departments can't afford to build in-house. I called it Redline. In 5 years it operated in 4 states. I told you all of that in one breath, because that's exactly how fast it happened to me. No dramatic montage, just relentless Tuesdays. 2 years ago, a hospital foundation approached Redline about co-sponsoring something new, a fellowship for young public interest attorneys who wanted legal training, specifically in disaster and emergency response law, a niche nobody funds. I put up the money on one condition: it would carry my grandfather's name, not mine. The Walt Calloway Fellowship. My name appears on 0 paperwork. I told myself that was humility. Standing where I stand now, here's the truer answer. Some part of me was still building a case file for a jury that would never convene. Proof my family could someday be handed, so they'd finally understand what they'd thrown out. I just built it in secret, so I could call it dignity, instead of what it actually was. The first fellow selected, out of 40 applicants, was a sharp young prosecutor, with genuinely good instincts. He wrote Redline a thank you letter through the foundation, never knowing who signed the check. His name was Julian. This spring, Julian sent Redline a wedding invitation. He was marrying my sister. I sat in the back row of white chairs at that wedding, not knowing a single thing yet, just watching Josie say vows that sounded, to my professional ear, oddly rehearsed, like a closing argument aimed at a jury of one. She promised Julian complete honesty, always. 200 guests sighed. I choked on my water. Then came the seating chart, and this is where the story turns. Julian's team had placed Redline's founder, me, at table 2, groom's side, honored guests. My mother read that chart from across the room, and I watched her face do something I had genuinely never seen it do in 28 years. It went blank with confusion. She didn't know who Nora Redline Rescue was. She'd never once looked me up. 9 years of erasure meant she'd erased herself out of the one piece of information that would have protected her that night. Josie found the chart faster. Brides always do. She crossed the floor, saw my name, and turned the color of the tablecloth, then did something strange. Her hands were shaking, not wedding day shaking. I've held a lot of hands in a lot of ambulances. I know panic when I see it, and panic that specific is never about a seating chart. It's about a second, bigger lie standing on top of a small one. She cornered me by the coat check. "Whatever you're planning," she hissed, "you're leaving before the toasts." I asked her one question. "What did you tell them happened to me?" She looked me dead in the eye and said, "There's no story. You don't exist. As far as anyone here knows, I'm an only child. Not villain movie erasure, bureaucratic erasure." I wasn't a scandal. I was a line item that had simply never been entered. I want you to notice I still hadn't said one angry word all night. That's not restraint for its own sake. That's 9 years of training. Every time I'd fought back as a kid, they'd used it as evidence I was difficult. So I'd learned the one move they had no defense against, staying exactly, unnervingly calm. I went back inside. I didn't cause a scene. I sat at table 2 next to my husband Sam, a battalion chief, the man who once out-argued me for 20 minutes on triage protocol before ever asking me to coffee, and I let the room keep turning. It turned fast. The groom's mother, a hospital administrator, leaned over during the salad course and asked, warm and curious, "So how do you know our Julian?" I had a choice in that second, to detonate the whole wedding with one true sentence. Instead, I said the smallest true thing I had. Small world, mutual connections. She smiled and moved on. I want you to hold on to how much I didn't say there, because it's the exact same amount Julian was about to say, entirely too much. The MC called for toasts. My mother went first, glowing, and delivered a version of the family motto I'd heard my whole childhood, polished now for 200 strangers. In this family, nothing is handed to you, everything is earned. I heard for the first time the sentence underneath that sentence. She wasn't describing us. She was quoting her own father's ledger, back at a room that had no idea whose voice it originally belonged to. For one breath I actually pitied her. Then I let it go, because you can understand where cruelty comes from, and still refuse to inherit it. Then Julian stood up, and he had no idea what he was about to detonate. He thanked his mentor first, a trauma surgeon he credited with teaching him, "You don't build a career, you build a habit of showing up." Then he said he wanted to thank the person who'd made the last 2 years of his legal career possible at all. An anonymous fellowship founder, he'd finally learned the identity of only weeks earlier, named for a retired fire captain who never got so much as a plaque. "Walt Calloway," Julian said, "and I found out his granddaughter is sitting right here tonight. Nora, would you stand?" 200 heads turned toward table 2. My mother's champagne glass stopped an inch from her mouth and did not move again. That's when Josie stood up too fast, grabbed the microphone stand for balance, and said the sentence that ended her own wedding, before anyone else could. "She's not, you weren't supposed to. She doesn't even practice law. She's nobody. Silence has a texture." This one had teeth. Julian turned to his brand new wife. Slow, the way you turn when something's just fallen through a floor above you. "Nobody?" he said quietly. "She's the reason I have a career. What exactly did you tell me her name was?" And here's the twist you didn't see coming, the one my sister never planned for. In the scramble to explain herself, Josie admitted, in front of 200 witnesses, including 3 senior partners from her own firm, that she'd been asked to resign 8 months earlier after failing to disclose a conflict of interest on a case, the promotion she'd been telling everyone, including her own fiancé, about all spring never happened. She'd built her entire engagement on a lie about her career, the same currency our mother had spent her whole life trading in. The family that scored love by achievement had just watched its golden daughter's achievement turn out to be fiction. My mother crossed the room and took my forearm with both hands, gentle now, an audience watching. "Darling," she said, loud enough for the first 3 rows only, "we'll discuss family matters privately. Come home for Sunday dinner. The frame," her voice actually caught, "the frame can finally be filled." There it was, the door I'd stood outside of for 9 years, thrown open, exactly on schedule, the second it was convenient for her image. I looked down at my grandfather's collar pin on my bracelet and thought about the sentence he never got to finish. I took out my phone, right there in the stone hallway, and played the voicemail all the way through for the first time in 5 years. "Nora, it's your grandfather, and there's something I should have told you years ago. Your mother, when she was young, nobody ever told her she was allowed to choose either. I watched my own wife do to her exactly what she's doing to you now, and I said nothing, and I have regretted it every day since. Don't wait for people with a ledger to tell you what you're worth, kid. Come see me Sunday. Bring the dog story. Bring all of it. Click. 40 seconds. 5 years to finish it. I cried exactly once in this whole story, standing in that hallway, and it wasn't grief for the family I'd lost. You can't lose what was never actually given to you. It was relief, for the 19-year-old at the bus stop who could have used those 40 seconds a lot sooner. I looked back at my mother's outstretched hands. I said, "No, the frame stays empty. I already built my own wall." And I walked out through the front doors, not the service hallway, at the exact center of the aisle. The wedding didn't survive the month. Julian filed for annulment 3 weeks later. My mother resigned her seat on the Bar Association's ethics committee that fall, not fired, just quietly obsolete in every room that used to matter to her. My father sent one email in November, 4 words, no subject line. "Your grandfather was right. I read it more times than I'll admit. I never answered it. Both of those things are true, and I've stopped needing them to fight each other. 6 months later, on an ordinary Sunday, I looked down my own dinner table. Sam arguing overtime pay with a rookie medic, my grandfather's collar pin on a shelf above the stove, that voicemail still saved, playable start to finish now while the potatoes boil. My wall at home has 11 frames, not one law degree, a Fire Academy graduation photo, a thank you card from a stranger whose life got saved on a walk-up 6th floor. My grandfather in his undershirt, mid-laugh, a photo nobody else ever thought to take. If a family ever made you audition for a seat at their table, hear this. Love that has to be earned was never love. It was a performance review with worse benefits, and you're allowed to walk out of the room before they finish grading you. That's my story. One empty frame I never filled, one collar pin, and a voicemail that took me 5 years to finish. If that hit close to home, tell me about your table in the comments. And subscribe, because I'm not the only one in this family who finally stopped waiting to be called on.